Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Okay, guys, thanks for joining us today. This is your Friday Roundup. Congratulations, you've made it to the weekend. And I have Brad here with me today. He is actually going to be doing this podcast from, I believe, New York. Is that right, Brad?
Yeah. Hey, Jonathan, I'm on vacation, as I've talked about in a couple of podcasts before this. And yeah, I'm sitting here in the basement of my in-laws' house with my trusty laptop and my microphone and ready to rock and roll.
Strong. Location independent. I think we found a good side hustle.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good.
Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the episode on Monday. Lots of stuff there. This was a long requested episode. It was one that when Brad and I started this podcast back in January, we were scared to do. I mean, sequence of returns is not something that you tackle lightly. It takes some thought and some planning. And obviously there was some building blocks of FI that you had to put underneath that before you could really tackle it with any sort of authority. And Big Earn is the right person to help us explore that topic, help us unpack it. And he did a great job. He has a 17-part, I think he's about to release the 18th part very soon, series on safe withdrawal rates. It's a phenomenal walk through how to explore the math and how safe withdrawal rates, or the 4% rule, or the 3.5% rule, or the 4% rule of thumb, however you want to phrase it, how that can actually be implemented for your specific situation. But sequence of returns is what we have been calling the gorilla in the room. And it's this idea that the returns that you get over those first few years really dictate your chances of success or failure. And we got a chance to really hit this from several different angles. And I think it told a pretty compelling story, but it'll be exciting today to get a chance to really talk about my takeaways and also get a chance to hear Brad's takeaways. And we've also been able to bring in some of the feedback from our community as well. So we'll hit on a couple things that we saw in our Facebook group this week.
Yeah, and I'm actually most curious to hear what the feedback from the audience was. I know because I'm on vacation, I haven't had the opportunity to be in the Facebook group as often as possible. So yeah, I'm as curious as anyone to hear that. But yeah, agreed. This was a long-awaited episode. You know, you used the word we were scared to do this. I think there needed to be building blocks first. You can't just jump in on day one with Big Earn and sequence of return risks. Like, I think that just wasn't the right order. I think we tried to explain the concept of FI. We tried to explain the benefits. We tried to explain the background math, you know, the simple math, right? The 4% rule, quote unquote, because that at least paints the picture of what we're trying to do here. But I think, as many people in our community have pointed out, it's just not that simple. And clearly we were never trying to paint this as something that, oh, you get 25 times your expenses saved up, you can retire and laugh all the way to your 100. That's just not realistic, but it is important to set up that background. And now that we are more mature here in the community and people do have the background, sequence of returns risks is important. And frankly, this was something that I wasn't as well versed in until we spoke with Earn.
Yeah, I loved hearing your thoughts on that. And I could not agree more. This show has developed and our audience really has developed right along with us. That Facebook group that we were just referencing has over 2,000 people in it now. And a lot of those kind of entry-level questions that people were asking at the very beginning, now they're answering it for new people that are finding the group for the first time. So we're all growing together. And Choose FI, when we started this, it was going to be this idea of a journey. It was this roadmap or this blueprint to financial independence. And we started with broad strokes. And we gave you the baseline that all of us, after we've read bloggers like Money Mustache and J.L. Collins, the broad strokes that all of us understood. And now what we're able to do is go in and do the detail work, show you the nuances. And honestly, this conversation did not make me more depressed or convince me that it didn't work. No, it gives me more confidence in the environment in which I find myself. And it made me feel empowered to be able to handle the curveballs that life will throw at you. Murphy and Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. This is what it looks like. And if you know the rules, you can win. If you don't know the rules, you're guaranteed to be ambushed by something that you didn't expect.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely that this actually made me feel more hopeful in this kind of bizarre way. I was worried that Earn was going to have doom and gloom, essentially, but it was the polar opposite of that, in my opinion, where he was adjusting for these real world scenarios, as well versed as Earn is in the numbers, right? And clearly he's an expert on a different level from just about any of us. He didn't just focus on the numbers. That's what I thought was so brilliant about his episode, and is why I'm going to go back personally and listen to it again and again, is that it was all about the real world. And he was saying that in real world scenarios, nobody would react like things go in his calculations, right? Like nobody would blindly and stupidly just continue to draw down regardless of the facts on the ground. And people would, as he said, they would maybe earn some more money, right? They'd have a side hustle. They'd lower their spending a little bit. They'd adjust in some manner. Another option would be to take 4% of your current portfolio each year and not based just blindly and stupidly again on that original portfolio. So like those are just a couple of tiny little things that you could adjust and really up the odds of success, even if you were extremely unlucky and had this scenario where there was a huge drawdown in the market in your first 5 years of retirement, or like we talked about, the double whammy of that 1959 cohort that he talked about, that is just really just bad luck. But you can still adjust and you can still retire early. So this is not some pipe dream. It's not, oh, I'm going to retire early, but I have to worry about sequence of return risks and that's going to destroy me. That was not Earn's message at all. And I thought that was a very hopeful thing.
Absolutely. Now, I will say there was the one side of this, and it's the unfortunate thing, because honestly, Brad and I are very optimistic people, and we want everybody to be able to win all the time. But there was one takeaway, and that was the savers and the early retirees cannot both be happy at the same time when it comes to sequence of return risk. So if you go back and you listen to that episode, sequence of return risk is extremely beneficial for the savers. So if you have that early on market crash and then it putters for a while before it comes back up for that first 5 years, for the savers, the people that are plowing money into their investment vehicles, they are winning by this. And frankly, they would be tempted to say that the crash is the best thing that could ever happen for them, as long as they don't lose their job, because they are able to continue to put money in at these depressed prices. And then when the market comes back up, their investment vehicles obviously ride that tidal wave back up to the top. Unfortunately, for those early retirees that are pulling the trigger at that same moment, those first 5 years are extremely dangerous. And so you really can't plan this. You can't decide when the crash is going to happen or when the market's going to take a downturn. That is not under your control. But if you understand the rules and you understand how sequence of return risk works, you can then mitigate the damage that it will do. And depending on where you fall on this curve, you can make choices, even choices ahead of time before it happens, that will prevent you from taking the full brunt of this risk. So you get to mitigate sequence of return risk at the margins and provide yourself with the chance to have the best outcome for your specific situation and for your specific timeline cohort.
And wasn't it fascinating that Jim Collins on episode 34 and now Earn on episode 35 both essentially said the same thing, right? About the saver. So the best thing that could happen to you as that saver or someone just starting out is that market crash. And certainly Jim was vehement about that he would hope the best thing someone could ever happen is a 90% drop in the market, because then that saver would be able to just plow money in. And it's all predicated, of course, on having a huge savings rate, which is what we talk about here at Choose a FI and in the FI community generally. And if you have that huge savings rate, you just keep plowing money in and you're buying on sale. Right? You're buying that same slice of all the publicly traded US companies when you buy VTSAX. But you're buying it for 90% off of what you would have paid the week before. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. And one thing that definitely jumped out to me about Earn is that the sequence of return risk is largely, it's not about these minor temporary drops or even a 10 or 15% drop in the market that would be sensational front page news for months. Right, Jonathan? I mean, that's just how that kind of stuff works. But that's not even what Earn's talking about. I mean, he's talking about prolonged downturns and significant downturns, right? So I think he said something to the tune of 5+ years. I think he even said 5 to 10 years and 20% or more. So those are the kind of scenarios that we're talking here. Otherwise, your chance of success is still significant, even if you did retire and the market dropped 10%, which again, to you would seem calamitous. Even still, you could adjust a little bit. If your nest egg went from $1 million to 900,000, Well, you can just take 4% of that 900,000 and take out $36,000 a year instead of 40 and tighten your belt a little bit, right? Like you don't even necessarily have to do this according to the math, but if that would make you feel better, if that was the real world scenario that Ern was talking about, then that increases your likelihood of success dramatically. I mean, it's that combination of the numbers and the real world just rationality that you need to take into account. And your chance of success is going to be significant other than in some horrible scenario. That's what we're really talking about with the sequence of return risk is the 5 to 10 year downturn. That's huge, significant, and prolonged. So those are the kind of things where you need to really change your mindset and change your plan.
Well, let's slow down and talk about that 4% rule just for a second, because I think this is the place where we need to actually pin down what that 4% rule actually means. So generically, we've said it's just if you have $1 million, 4% is $40,000 a year that you can draw. But specifically, the 4% rule, as it's understood generally by the FI community, is a fixed number. So no matter what the market does, if it goes up or down, when you hear just the 4% rule, people are suggesting that you pick the number based on the initial value, and then you can just keep it there no matter what happens, and it will just work for you. And so what Brad and what Ern was saying is if you're willing to change it from a fixed number to a percentage number. So for instance, 4% of $1 million is $40,000. And let's say your accounts go down to $500,000, then 4% of that would be $20,000. If you do it as a percentage, then you will never run out of money. But the problem with that is that those massive swings will obviously cause some huge distortion in what you can spend each year. Now, the upside of that is if there's a year where your accounts goes up something absurd, like 15 or 18% in a single year, if you're using a fixed number, you would still just draw out the 40,000. Whereas if you're allowing yourself to do a percentage basis, if your accounts have suddenly grown up to $2 million, you can now withdraw $80,000 a year. So this was not the conversation where we're going to try and pin that down exactly. Actually, we have some plans to start talking about drawdown strategies. And I don't think that we're going to limit ourselves to one perfect scenario. What we're going to do is we're going to actually find people that have done it different ways. And we're going to go find some experts that have taken the time not just to decide what their drawdown strategy is going to be, but actually commit to it on paper. And we're going to get them to explain it to us. And we're going to provide you a couple different ways to approach this. That way you can find a drawdown strategy that fits your psychological model or your mental model or something that you're comfortable with. But the other half of this that I wanted to go back to is the actual just fixed 4% rule. So you have $1 million, you're withdrawing 4% a year, you're not going to change it, you're just drawing 4% a year. What people don't talk about nearly enough, and frankly, something that I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about, is that 4% is inflation adjusted. Inflation is built into that. And so I'm going to read a question that we got from Steven, and I want to preface this by saying that we went ahead and got Big Ern to respond to this. So Steven says, great episode. One of the questions I had while listening is this. If we're using the safe withdrawal rate of 4% and say we have $1 million and are taking out $40,000 yearly from that, from the episode, it sounds like that our number without any variables, we would continue to take out $40,000 yearly for the rest of our lives. And what happens with inflation? That $40,000 will be worth less and less as we age. So essentially, should we be taking out 4% safe withdrawal rate plus inflation every year to maintain our standard of living? Seems like that is the way it should be, but I couldn't quite figure that out and didn't hear it on the podcast. Nice work, though. I really enjoyed the perspectives. So Steven, the Friday Roundup is the place where we try to address the nuances that we missed in the episode. And so we have actually already reached out to Big Ern to get his feedback on this. So Big Ern says, that's a great question. I do take inflation into account in my simulation. So withdrawals are indeed adjusted for inflation, and the retiree does not have to worry about inflation eroding the purchasing power of his or her retirement. You can do the simulations with inflation adjustments at least 2 different ways, and they will produce the same results. Your first option: increase the nominal withdrawals by the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, every year. For example, the 40,000 would become 40,800 in year 2 with a 2% inflation in that year, and then 42,000 in year 3 if inflation was 3% the next year, and then simply add the capital market returns to the portfolio net of withdrawals every year. And then your second option, and this is actually the option that Big Ern uses, it sounds slightly more complicated. So he says he keeps the $40,000 withdrawals constant, but then he applies real inflation-adjusted returns to the portfolio. So what that means is he takes his equity and his bond returns and he subtracts the inflation from that. So let's say that he makes 12% and the inflation that year is 3%, he withdraws the 3% and adds that to the 40,000, and he puts the remaining balance back into the portfolio. So then if the portfolio ends up at some number of dollars down the road after 30 years, the final value is also in an inflation adjusted terms, because he's been withdrawing that inflation the entire time. And he says, whichever method you use, it doesn't really matter, but he's seen some shenanigans on other blogs when using method 1. For example, the misleading claim that when using the 4% rule, in 90% of the cases, you would have maintained the initial capital after 30 years. He says that's true, but people forgot to mention that this final value is not inflation adjusted, so the probability of preserving your capital after inflation is much lower than 90%. I hope I didn't lose too many of you there, but basically, if you're considering success, so let's say that you have $1 million right now, and you're considering success to preserve your capital 20 or 30 years from now, and 20 or 30 years from now, you still have $1 million in your account, that is not the same as $1 million today. That does not take into account that inflation has eroded the purchasing power of that $1 million. So in terms of real returns, you need to have $1 million in order to truly consider yourself having preserved the capital, not erode the capital. Your $1 million 30 years from now needs to be inflation adjusted. So imagine that's 3% every year for the next 30 years. $1 million would be significantly more 30 years from now than in today's dollars. And by the way, for those of you like me that are drawing W-2 income, do you now get more irritated when you only get a 1 or 2% raise, or you get a raise that literally doesn't keep up with inflation? Sidebar soapbox, but yeah, I noticed that.
But what's so interesting is also like the real world perspective, right? Like, so I'm hearing this, and of course I conceptually understand that $1 million today is not the same as $1 million 20 years from now, right? Because you have to adjust for inflation. But if you're telling me that I could pull out essentially using this 4% rule of thumb, right? The very loose 4% rule of thumb, pull out $40,000 a year every year for the next 20 years. And maybe we could argue inflation adjust or not, but largely irrelevant. If I could pull out $40,000 a year and still have $1 million left 20 years from now, that to me is a real world resounding success. It's not even close, right? Like I'm doing cartwheels if that's the case. So just looking at this from my own perspective, and I suspect a lot of people's perspective, like that is a success. So it might not be the mathematical success that Ern might be talking about, but in the real world, if I have been able to live a FI lifestyle for 20 years, pulling out the amount of money I need to live and sustain myself every single year in a very nice lifestyle and still have the $1 million 20 years from now, I'm thrilled. So, again, it's all about where you're coming from, right? I mean, I might even argue even if I had less than $1 million, I'd still be thrilled 20 years from now. But, that's a conversation for another day, surely. But yeah, this is definitely comes down to your own perspective and how much the math means to you or how much the real world scenario means to you. So again, a topic for another day, but I challenge you guys out there to really think about what success would look like for you.
Yeah, and pause on that. That is ultimately what is going to dictate this idea of what your safe withdrawal rate needs to be. It's what is your definition of success? I believe, and Ern can correct me if I'm wrong, but in many cases, Ern is talking about preserving capital. And he is basically saying that if you are wanting to preserve your capital, and not just your capital, but your capital in inflation adjusted dollars, his safe withdrawal rate is 3.3%. And, when he adds in other idiosyncratic factors, Social Security, possible pensions, that sort of thing, it goes back up to like 3.5. But if he's considering that success rate to be preserving his capital in inflation adjusted dollars, you can understand why he's going to need a lower safe withdrawal rate for that. Conversely, if you are not as concerned about preserving capital, or specifically preserving capital in inflation adjusted dollars, then potentially your safe withdrawal rate could be a little bit higher. Also, that flexibility component, Ern landed on it. He was talking about geo arbitrage as a tool. All the other stuff that we talk about doesn't go out the window. You need to realize the more tools that you have in your bag, the ability that you have to pivot with what the market sends you, all those dictate what withdrawal rate you're going to end up landing on. And the other fact here is that one of the things that makes this so dicey is these tiny margins with which you're working, and also what you're defining as success. In many cases, you may only be moving this safe withdrawal point by 0.1%, but depending on your idea of flexibility and whether or not you're going with fixed or percentage-based withdrawals, the difference can be hundreds, if not millions of dollars when you're projecting out down the road, and depending on what the market actually ends up doing. So this is a very nuanced game, and trying to put this one-dimensional number on it makes it extremely difficult. So our goal is not to say this is the one number, but to let you understand what the different factors are that you need to consider so that you can pivot with your own unique circumstances and timeline.
Yeah, and it always comes down to facts on the ground, your own personal situation, and what your definition of success is, right? So like, talk about different scenarios. What if someone didn't care about passing on the capital to heirs or anyone in their family? That changes the ballgame entirely. Do they really care about preservation? No, they just need the money to last their lifetime. So that's something that can change the calculation significantly. And there are many, many of these things, and we could not possibly talk about this on an hour podcast. I mean, it's inconceivable to talk about every possible scenario that everyone out there has. But as Jonathan just said, like, it's just laying the groundwork. Is that the right word?
I don't know, but I can't hear the word inconceivable without thinking about Princess Bride.
I'm not sure that word means. What do you think it means?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me try to finish my sentence. But we're just trying to lay the framework here for you guys to understand what you need to think about, right? So while the math is elegant and it's beautiful, it's not everything. It's not the entire story, and it never will be. And even Earn certainly makes allowances for these real world scenarios. So that's the kind of stuff that you just need to use as the starting point for the conversation with yourself, with your spouse, with whomever. That's for you guys to figure out, but it's for us to at least paint this picture of what you need to be thinking about.
And now that we've gotten a chance to explore the math and how it works, as soon as we've done drawdown strategies, going into the future, we're going to be able to bring in specific people and have them share what their strategy is, like their actual numbers and what their plan is and how they plan on responding to different market variances. So you will get a chance to see specific cases, what people are actually doing going into the end of this year, beginning of next year. But hopefully this is going to provide us a similar foundation that we can all work from going forward. Now, there's 2 points that I wanted to round this episode out on. The first one that I want to talk about and get Brad's input is this idea of whether or not you should pay off your mortgage. Now, ultimately, this is going to be a very personal choice, and I don't think there is a wrong answer, but I will say that all too often, and especially from Dave Ramsey, you hear a very one-dimensional answer: pay off your mortgage, pay off your mortgage, pay off your mortgage. And it has to do with cash flow. And the challenge that he puts out to his listeners, and even me, I felt it at a very personal level. If you had a paid-for home, would you go out and borrow the same amount of money at 3 or 4%? And generally, the wisdom or what you hear back, the feedback is no. And so Dave Ramsey says, well, then you should pay down your mortgage. And that has been enough for me in my own mind to convince me that paying down the mortgage is almost always the right answer when you can, or at least enough of it that is probably personally what I would have done. I'm a very debt averse person. I do not like any form of debt in my life. I want to completely get rid of all of it. And I think that has always just kind of been a part of my lifestyle. And in fact, it's not just the Dave Ramsey crowd. Mr. Money Mustache has a paid for home. There are many FI bloggers that have extremely low cost of living lifestyles. And as a result of that, when their life only costs $20,000 or $30,000 a year, their money goes a lot farther. So I get the compelling case for that. But in this specific episode, this was the most compelling case that I've ever heard, and certainly a place to start from for why you should not necessarily in every case pay off your mortgage early, especially when you're talking about being in your 20s and 30s. And it goes to the idea of sequence of return risk. And ultimately, one of the ways to mitigate the damage of sequence of return risk is to be plowing money into equities, into the stock market, or if you're following specifically our advice, into your index funds over long swaths of time, 10, 20, 30 years. And if you decide to pay off your mortgage early, your $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 mortgage, you decide to throw all of your money at that investment that's a 3 or 4% fixed interest rate. That means you have less to invest in the stock market, which means that let's say you spend 10 years and you pay off your mortgage for 10 or 15 years, and now you only have 20 years left to invest before you pull your FI trigger. You are now cramming all of those contributions into a smaller window, which means you are at a higher risk of being vulnerable to this sequence of returns. And so Earn makes the case that at least early on, you plow as much money into equities as possible, which then softens your sequence of return risk. Now, I hope that makes sense. Now, I want to say that I don't think Ern's point here is that you never pay off your mortgage or that you don't pay it off early at all. It's just that it shouldn't be the first thing on your radar. You need to get that snowball rolling for you. We always talk about the debt snowball and how it rolls against you, but you want that snowball to roll with you, carrying you to your FI number. That's when we talk about how the math works for you. This is what we're saying. We got to get that snowball going. And when you have a small timeline to invest, you're more vulnerable to sequence of returns. Brad, was that a light bulb moment for you at all?
Yeah, that was really interesting. And yeah, I think Ern's quote was spreading out your equity purchases over years helps alleviate your sequence of returns risk. And that was, something I wrote down because it was a very powerful quote. And I think what Ern was saying was if you're paying off your mortgage in an extraordinarily abbreviated time period, let's say a 5 to 7 years, that means you are plowing every available dollar into that mortgage, right? To the tune of potentially tens of thousands of dollars a year of extra principal payments. So when you're done with that, all right, well, now you have potentially tens of thousands of dollars a year that needs to go somewhere. And hopefully at that point, you're going to put it into equities. But you're increasing your sequence of return risk because you've put nothing from the basically inception till now, until this date where you paid off your mortgage. And boom, then you're just plowing tens of thousands of dollars a year into equities. And that just by definition increases your risk that you're going to put it in at the quote unquote wrong time, right? So that's why spreading it out in hopefully fairly uniform amounts. And of course, we hope that they're ever increasing, right? As your income goes up, maybe your expenses go down, but your savings rate is going up as your income goes up and you're putting more money in. Well, that's fine. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about doing absolutely nothing and then boom, on some random date in the future, you're plowing thousands of dollars a week or a month into the stock market. Well, I think that's what Ern is talking about, where this is a risk. And that was a point that I just never considered before. So as we've said, Ern knows the numbers. And if he's telling us that increases sequence of return risk, then I certainly believe him. And it makes intuitive sense to me.
And you pointed something out. It wasn't just that he enlightened, I think, people that were just coming from the Dave Ramsey crowd. He expanded my perspective of what the problem was. And if I were going to analyze what my perspective was, basically, I was just looking at it that if you decide to pay down your home, all you're getting is your 3 or 4% rate of return, right? But if you invest in the stock market, you're potentially getting upwards of 8% rate of return. And then the difference it can be critical for you. That's my one-dimensional approach on it. That's what I thought the math was saying. He expanded the playing field by talking about how it affected sequence of return risk and added that second dimension to it, which I think might be that last piece that people needed to see the difference. Because when you're just comparing, 1 in the hand versus 2 in the bush, which is a guaranteed 4% rate of return versus the possibility of 8, I understand how that's a coin toss sometimes for some people. Because the market doesn't always go up and cash flow can be a beautiful thing. But when you add this onto it, it's almost like when you have the pro and con table, you need that extra piece to tilt you to one side. Now, I will say that at some point, and I think maybe you could make the case once you've hit your number, or maybe when you've hit the crossover point, that point in time in which the money that you have in your investment vehicles is actually earning more for you than what you're contributing from your W-2 income. That might be a great place to make a line in the sand. Paying down the mortgage might be the right play at that point. It won't affect your snowball. At some point in your timeline, your money is earning more for itself than what you are adding to it. And once you feel like that is the case to go back and pay down that mortgage aggressively makes a lot of sense. But you've got to get that snowball going, my friends. And just keep this in mind as one of the reasons why you might want to consider not paying down your mortgage in your 20s and 30s.
Yeah, I hear you, Jonathan. And I think it ultimately comes down to an emotional decision. So, the way that you just described it almost sounded like a mathematical case. Like, okay, once you've reached your number, well, then maybe it's a smart move, or maybe you could make the case. I still think it's just emotional. And I don't mean that good, bad, or indifferent. I don't mean that in a loaded way at all. I think the math would always suggest that you should invest in equities. I think that's what the math says. And I think Ern would back me up in this, certainly. But from that emotional, psychological perspective, there is a great allure of paying off that mortgage. And I think that's why that question that the Dave Ramsey crowd asks is, I know it hits me. It hits me right in the stomach because, you ask, if you had a fully paid for home, would you take out a loan for 3% on that and then invest the money? And I think my reflexive kind of emotional answer is no, because I like that concept of having that mortgage paid off. There is great psychological satisfaction in that. There's no question about it. But is that the right move mathematically? Is that the right move for long-term financial success? It probably isn't. But that said, I still would be okay with it in my own personal life. But Jonathan is not suggesting that that's the right move mathematically, nor am I. But that doesn't mean it's not the right move for you. Again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier in the episode and on many prior episodes. You have to take all of the information that we present, that many of these other thought leaders present, and you need to figure out what works in your life. That is ultimately what this comes down to. So we are not dictating on high that you need to take out a loan at 3% and invest it because that's what the math would suggest. That's garbage if that doesn't work for you, if that doesn't help you sleep at night. So take the information and talk about this, mull it over, figure out what works for you, and game it out so that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, whatever it is, when this situation actually arises in your life, you've thought about it, right? Like that's really powerful, is game planning this out and thinking about what will I think about emotionally and psychologically? What will that look like when I do reach that number or when I reach X point in my life? That helps you and will help you immeasurably.
Yeah. And I'll say that I'm not an ultra optimizer. I'm not specifically a math guy. I'm very debt averse. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. And you could make the same case for student loans. I had a 6-figure amount of student loan debt. Big Earn would tell me if I were to just go get his advice based on the math, using the same points I just laid out. I have a fixed interest rate. I'm young. I have a high marginal tax bracket. I should not pay down my student loans just based on the math. And I should plow every dollar I can into my investment vehicles, fill those suckers up, let it ride, pay down the student loans over time. I didn't do that. I paid them off. And I tell you, I sleep like a baby at night. And so I can see how you could extend that over to the mortgage as well. But you're going to have to find your own personal tolerance and comfort zone there. But this is the math.
You know what would be fascinating, Jonathan? And I just thought of this now is I know you kept detailed spreadsheets of the amount that you paid off each month for your student loans, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
I'd be so curious to send that to Earn and have him run the numbers on if you had invested in VTSAX every month.
I don't want to know.
But wouldn't that be interesting, right? I know you don't want to know, but it would be so fascinating.
Especially when I'm in a 35+%, marginal tax bracket. It would be so painful.
Yeah. No, I mean, you'd have to include that too. Yeah. I mean, it's, and that's not to suggest that you made the wrong decision because like you said, you sleep like a baby, but that's what we're talking about here, right? Is the math might suggest a different answer, but that doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. And that is really powerful.
Dagnabbit, dude. All right, Earn, I'll send you my numbers, man. You can run that for me. I don't really want to know, but I'll send them to you.
But also, that's not to suggest we've had a great run up in equities the last couple of years. So you might really see a number that you don't like, but that's not to suggest that would be the answer every year, right? Isn't that what sequence of return risk is about? That there are different results depending on the year that you started, the cohort you're in, as Earn would say.
Yeah, well, let's see. Earn, I'm not exactly sure what you would need to know, but I would imagine just to give you off the cuff numbers, basically I had $168,000 in student loan debt. I paid them off over 4 years. And I did that while being in a 25% marginal tax bracket and then state tax of 8%, FICA, all that jazz. And then it was at a 6% interest rate. So I probably ended up plowing $180 some odd thousand in after-tax dollars. I mean, that's probably enough, and I don't really want to know the answer to that, but you can do the math very quickly and come up with a off the cuff number of what that might look like. You would have done probably very well by making the opposite choice of what I made.
And did you not max out 401k because you were paying off student loans?
I did not. I got the match, got my 4%, but yeah, I mean, but if I hadn't done that, I would still have 2 years on my student loans now, and I would be tied down and not have nearly the flexibility I have. So I'm going to make an announcement in a couple of weeks here about some FFLC related stuff, fully funded lifestyle change stuff. And if you have extremely low cost of living because you paid off all your debt, your ability to take risk in the future goes up a lot higher. So there's definitely more dimensions to this than just the math.
Yeah. And that's what we're talking about, right? There are always these factors. And that's what's so cool about talking about this from a real high conceptual level, but then getting down into the nitty gritty of someone's situation. And many tens of thousands of someones who are out there listening to this. Like every single person has a different situation. So just fascinating stuff. And one other point that I wanted to make, which is directly tied into this, how absolutely amazing is it that Ern went to college for free and then invested his student loan for a positive net worth after the fact? Like, just how perfect is that? And completely appropriate, and just something you'd expect from someone like Ern. It's just brilliant.
I just want to see more stories like that because, that's like an Edmund move right there. There are people in our community that just do this stuff and they never had a place to talk about it anywhere else. They would just get totally these weird sidewise glances. But in our community, like, this is the stories that we want to highlight, and they don't need to be the exceptions. They can be the rules. They can be the models. You can start modeling your choices after these, what seems like an unconventional choice at the time. But then when you're looking at it with a slightly different perspective, you say, what an obvious choice. Why doesn't everybody try that? Or something similar to that. The last thing I wanted to talk about is this ongoing debate between dollar cost averaging and lump sum investing. And when we talk to a lot of the influencers in our space, and specifically, I had to ask both JL Collins and Big Ern this, you get this windfall of say $100,000 or more, it could be any number you want. And it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, you're driving to the airport, or conversely, that was an inside joke for people that listen to the episode, but you're investing it in the stock market when your PE and CAPE ratio are at a near all-time high. And you're wondering, is this the right move? Should I just throw it all in at once because that's what the math says? Or should I dollar cost average it and invest it maybe piecemeal over an extended period of time? And I sent that over to Ern expecting an answer. And I got, first of all, the answer that I pseudo anticipated, which is lump sum investing is the way to go. But then what he did is he gave me this option C that I had never considered before and I hadn't heard anybody else consider, which is the best of both worlds. He said, recognizing that it may be 4 p.m. in the afternoon, if you want to get the best of both worlds and you absolutely know you're going to get this windfall of pick a number, and it doesn't have to be $100,000. It could be, even numbers smaller than that, 50,000, 20,000, whatever it may be. If you want to dollar cost average it and you know it's coming in, what if you borrowed the money from some other place, maybe like your emergency fund or some other vehicle or cash or a HELOC or anything else, and you invested that money into the stock market ahead of time, 1/3 of it. And then when you got the actual windfall in, then you invested another 1/3 of it in. And then finally, maybe a month or two later, but that's a very equal amount. So 1 month before, the day of, and then 1 month after, you invested that final 1/3. And so this way, you get the benefits of spreading that money over 3 distinct points. That way you don't have to worry about you picking that very moment right before the market goes to a downturn. But at the same time, when you average those results in together, it's still like you had done a lump sum investment. Totally brilliant. Never heard anybody else mention it. Something that it's a tool that you can put in your back pocket if you were to ever experience that guaranteed windfall, which many of us at some point in our life will have some form of a windfall coming our way. Although I doubt in our community it's coming from the lotto ticket at the 7-Eleven. Nothing, Brad, nothing.
Yeah, I got nothing on that. That is very true.
Those are my big takeaways. I feel satisfied that I've done my due diligence on this episode. Was there anything else that you'd like to cover today?
Yeah, there was just one other quick thing, but it's actually more of an open question to Ern, which is there was one important thing that I heard that may have been missed by the audience. I know I kind of missed it the first time through. It was around minute like 37 and a half. And he basically said one way to help alleviate sequence of return risk is to have a larger bond portfolio in the very early years of retirement, and then to move to a higher percentage of equities after the first, let's say, 5 years. And this intrigued me significantly because I guess he's saying one of the big sequence of return risk possibilities is a significant and prolonged downturn, let's say the first 5 years, and having a higher percentage in bonds, which might not be your long-term strategy, but that might help alleviate that issue in the first, let's say, 3 to 7 years or thereabouts, and then move back into a larger equity percentage. So this is something, again, that was just kind of in passing. Jonathan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I'd really love if, I know Ern listens to these episodes, if this is something he could record an answer to and send it back to us. I think this is worthy of some more thought and some more discussion. So, again, that's why these roundups are great, right? It gives us an opportunity to, I missed that the first time and I didn't follow up with Ern, which I should have as the host, but I get to now. So, love to hear from Ern and Jonathan, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I actually do have some thoughts on this, but they're not really mine. I'm going to share, this is from Danny on our Facebook group. And I've been very impressed just by his general insights on his allocation models. And I'm particularly interested in it because he actually went through the 2008 downturn and came out okay on the other side. And so he's actually in recent memory had to deal with this and had some thoughts to share about what this looked like for him. And so his short answer of what he actually does, he agrees with us, one, that flexibility is the key to this whole thing. And for him, it means flexibility means oversaving, having 2 years spending in bonds, and then keeping your skills up to date so you can add back into the workforce if you need to, and then maybe considering your house paid off. So clearly the answer here is not just never pay your home off. The key is flexibility, knowing the math. But aside from that, Danny retired in 2006. He got hit very hard in 2008, but he had 60% stocks, 40% bonds. And so he was able to stick with his strategy. He says, I sold my bonds and kept buying stocks as the market was moving down, keeping my 60-40 mix. If you have 100% in stocks and you're retired, you are far more likely to freak out and abandon your strategy. I saw it happen. I give up about 0.5% in expected returns for every 10% that I hold in bonds, but it protects me against my worst risk, which is myself abandoning my strategy. Things are very different between the early accumulation phase and the pre-retirement phase. And I think there's so much value here. A lot of us feel like we're very confident that we won't be phased by a market downturn. And we can say, you know what, if the market crashes, it'll be the best thing that ever happened to me. But if you just hit your number, let's say your number is $600,000, you just hit your number and the market crashes and you go down to 225, you're telling me that you're not going to bat an eye, especially if you just pulled your FI trigger and you're now completely relying on that income. Danny is providing some great insight on what that actually looked like and how he managed that. And it goes back to what J.L. Collins said about you need to be able to sleep at night, and bonds smooth the ride. And what we're hoping to do as someone that hasn't lived through having to deal with that, and specifically, I mean, drawing down on my money through a crash, I can say that I can't truly appreciate what that must be like. But getting a chance to benefit from what other people have done. And the value of this show is that we're able to find them and they're willing to share with us how they interacted with the circumstances that they were presented with. Hopefully we can gain some backbone, some spine, and also some ideas on how to manage that. And so for Danny, his number was twofold. It was a 60-40 allocation, but it was also this idea of he knew he had 2 years worth of money in bonds. And so plus he had more than he needed. So those two things add up to flexibility. Now, I will just say that this is not an episode about drawdown strategy. We are actually planning on doing a show or several shows featuring different strategies. But hopefully the psychology of this and how people have handled these downturns will prepare you for when it comes, because you'll know what other people did that managed to ride it out and thrive on the other side.
And yeah, we can never know how we'll react psychologically until we're in that scenario. But again, learning from people who have been there, mentally rehearsing and preparing yourself for that possibility. These are all things that are going to help you and basically help you not freak out and sell at the worst possible time. And Ern said something to the effect, and this was about buy and hold investors, so it's not exactly pertinent, but basically they don't have to worry about sequence of return risk as long as they, quote, didn't do anything stupid like sell at the bottom. And I think that is something that Jim Collins talked about in last week's episode. Ern talked about here. That is really the worst case scenario, is to sell at the bottom and just freak out. So you need to prepare yourself years in advance to, okay, if this happens, here's my response. And you need to just almost like game plan it out, right? Mock plan this as if it's going to happen. How will I respond? So I think there's great power in that. And it's just visualizing, it's rehearsing, and it's trying to figure out, what will I do? Because downturns are inevitable. They will happen. It's a guarantee. And you just don't know when. You don't know if that's going to happen the day after you hit your FI number and you pull the trigger, or 10 years later and you're already fine past the sequence of return risk issue. You just don't know. But you need to prepare yourself, in my opinion, for the worst case scenario and see, how will I react?
Okay. As usual, your thoughts, your feedback, send it to us, feedback@choosefi.com. And if you want to join this conversation and you want to continue it week round, go to our Facebook group. And if you want to be a part of that private group, just go to choosefi.com/Facebook. Follow the prompts there. We'll send you the link to the private group. We would love to see you on the other side of this conversation, have you be a part of it. Get a chance to actually put your questions out there and get feedback from us and also from our community, which is now, Brad, more than 2,000 people. We slipped over that line while you were out of town this weekend.
Yeah, I saw it. It's remarkable. Yeah, I think we're over 2,100 at time of recording here. So it is growing by leaps and bounds. And we kind of joked, me, you, Sunwoo, and Noah, the four admin moderators, we were joking in a little message that we can't keep up with it. It's amazing. There are just so many comments, so many insightful comments, so many insightful questions, threads. I mean, it really is remarkable. And we're not just blowing smoke. I mean, like, this is the community that we envisioned when we started Choose FI, and it's here. It's real, and more of you are joining every single day, and it really is wonderful. So I definitely, if you like this conversation, if you like the information that we're sending, this community is not about me and Jonathan. It really, at this point, it's so much larger than that. And the Facebook group is where you see that. So yeah, just choosefi.com/Facebook. And yeah, please join us, join the conversation.
Okay, so let's take a few minutes and talk about what's been going on in our community over the last week or two. First of all, Brad, I know that you posed the first challenge to our Facebook group, and specifically you wanted to know how people are taking action. And you had over 250 responses on how individuals in our community were taking that first step to improving their lives and hopefully just taking their game to the next level in every way.
Yeah, that was amazing and blew me away beyond any expectation. But that is going to be a weekly post. So every single week, and that's my challenge to the community, right? Is Jonathan, you and I, we talk about actionable steps. That is what we hope every single episode, that you're not just listening to hear us banter and talk about random stuff. It's to come away from every single episode with something you can take action on and something that can improve your life. And a real simple thing to do is just to do one thing this week. Okay, you have 7 days, you have 168 hours to make just one simple change that will either make your life more efficient, maybe shave off an hour of busy work, or just, wasted time, or doing something that'll help you save money, or that'll improve your long-term health and wellness. Just anything, something, even just play a board game with your family, just something different, something that you disrupted. Again, like we talked about with Dominic, putting that space between the stimulus and the response, right? And just doing something different in your life to make it better, right? We all complain about being busy, and that's just not good enough, right? You have weeks and years and decades to make your life better. And it is incumbent and imperative upon you that you take action, right? This is not a passive thing. You need to take action. So anyway, long story short, every single week I'm posting this, and man, seeing 250 responses was just mind-blowing. And it really just gave me hope. And it just hammered it home, Jonathan, that you and I are doing something here that's working, right? That people are listening and taking action and improving their lives. It was amazing. And yeah, we would love to read a bunch of these on the podcast, but just because of the fact that I'm sitting here in my in-laws' basement and we're trying to furiously record a couple of podcasts today, we're gonna cut this episode a little bit short. But rest assured, Jonathan and I read every single one of those, and we definitely plan on talking about them in the future.
But I will say that Mary started eating an apple a day. Very proud of you, Mary.
Hey, good way to go, Mary.
Okay, so we have a travel rewards voicemail that I'm going to play today, and this is from Andrew. And a lot of our community has been introduced to travel rewards for the first time because of this podcast. We pride ourselves that is actually a very useful resource and a great way to lower the bar to entry to travel rewards if you weren't already aware of the possibilities of being able to travel the world for free or nearly free. And at this point, many people in our community have not only gotten started with their first travel rewards card, but they're now in the process of booking their first trip. And as our community starts to get more and more aware of the possibilities, hopefully we will continue to get more and more voicemails like these that we will be able to play for you and share these really cool ideas and these really cool trips that you can piece together just using creativity and optimizing the way that you go about your day-to-day purchases just a little bit. So this is from Andrew, and I'm very excited to play this for you.
Hey guys, my name is Andrew and I'm calling in from Chicago, and I've got an awesome Frugal win that's in process that I love to share with y'all. So the basics are, my girlfriend and I, we want to go to Argentina in December of 2018. And while we can't book that far out yet, I've been searching for flights for December of this year just to get an idea of what the costs are. Now, flights typically run from around $1,500 to $1,800 round trip per person that time of year, especially if you want to avoid multiple layovers. So I've been doing some research, and I discovered that United is actually a great option for flying from Chicago to Argentina. And in listening to your Travel Rewards podcast, I remember that it was worth taking a look outside of the Chase travel portal to see how many United points we would need to cover our flights. And since we're pretty flexible on dates, there are plenty of options for booking flights for 30,000 United points. That would be 60,000 round trip, and that's 120,000 total points for the both of us round trip. So now that I know that I can transfer our Chase United rewards points 1-for-1 to United, I'm basically positive that we're going to be flying round trip from Chicago to Argentina for 120,000 total points in their prime tourist season. So the cool thing here is just by setting our travel goal ahead of time, doing a little research, and getting a little credit card strategy behind us, I know it's going to be easy for us to accumulate well over those points in the next 6 to 9 months or so. And what this really all means is we're going to be saving $3,000 to $3,600 total dollars while getting a dream vacation. So a free trip to Argentina, it looks like it's in our future. That's insane. Thank you guys for the wealth of knowledge you're providing. The fire is definitely spreading.
All right, Brad, I know that you're just itching to go at this. So that is awesome.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Congratulations, Andrew. That's fantastic. That is a huge savings and basically as good as it gets. And not only that, but you approach it in such a logical manner and really with all the hallmarks of what I describe to people as ways to succeed. So flexibility, that's the crucial part. You said in there, we can be flexible with our dates. And around prime tourist season, like you said, there are going to be other people flying. So there are going to be other people looking to book these award flights. That's just a reality. But because you can be flexible, plus or minus a couple days or even a couple weeks, that's going to increase your chances of success significantly. Another thing is you're planning a year and a third in advance or thereabouts. I think you said December of 18. I'm not 100% positive, but I mean, that is huge that you have that much time in advance to scope this out, to open up particular credit cards to get these points, and then to book as soon as you're ready, right? As soon as you can find availability. So all those things are going to lead to success. And then that you had the epiphany that, hey, not only do I have the option to book through the Chase Ultimate Rewards portal, which is basically just going to be based on the price. So if it's $1,800, Chase gives you, I think, 1.25 cents per point if you have the Sapphire Preferred or the Ink Plus, and that's it. So there's no way to get that amazing deal that you found when you had that aha moment and said, oh, wait, I can transfer these points. So my Chase Ultimate Rewards points become United miles. Okay. And in that case, you could get a round trip for 60,000 miles. And if that's going to save you $1,800, that's 3 cents per point. That is a great redemption. So that sure as heck beats the 1.25 cents per point that Chase would give you to book through their travel portal. So just very simply find the availability, transfer those 120,000 points from Chase to United, and that happens instantly. So you would only transfer once you've found the availability, and then just book them. And in this case, earn nearly or in upwards of 3 cents per point. So yeah, I mean, all around creative work, and just good job, Andrew, and congrats. So to everyone out there, we have a wonderful resource and really set of resources. If you head to choosefi.com/travel, you'll find our podcast, which was episode 9, our original podcast on travel rewards. We've subsequently done a second podcast on travel rewards and a bunch of articles, our recommended cards page. There's a whole bunch of resources there. So yeah, choosefi.com/travel.
Okay. And I have a frugal win of the week for you. This one is from Ashley, and Ashley says, I finally reached my car goal. 300,000 miles on my first car that I purchased new. It's a 1999 Toyota Solara. Took me 18 years and 2 months to reach the goal. The car has no rust and still runs great. The maintenance is done by a cousin who is a mechanic and works on the side for the family. Brad, first of all, she's making you look like a rookie. 300,000 miles.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have 114,000 now, and Laura's car just passed 108,000. So yeah, combined, we're not even close.
Okay, and then my second thing here is this idea of having a mechanic that you trust. I think many of us instinctively have this feeling that we're going to pick a mechanic that is not going to do right by us, right? It's just this, I'm not going to go find the right guy. But if you are lucky enough to find a mechanic that you absolutely trust, share that information. Like, share it with me. If you live in Richmond, Virginia, and you have a mechanic that you absolutely trust, shoot me an email, let me know, because I want to find a guy. And if you stretch that out with almost every aspect of your life, finding a group of people that you can rely on for different things that you trust is so valuable. And And, one of the reasons that she made it to 300,000 miles is that mechanic that works on the side for the family. And for me, that's something that I want to have. I don't have. I almost want to say that's a checkpoint of FI. If there's some sort of checkpoints that have to do with vehicles in the FI community, then somewhere on that list has to be, I found a mechanic that I trust and I rely on. And I'm still trying to check that box. What about you, Brad?
Yeah, it's hard. It really is hard. For some reason, that industry just has this reputation, whether right or wrong, that you're going to find someone who's unscrupulous and who's going to somehow screw you over. And I'm not sure if that's fair, frankly, but it does seem to be something that people talk about all the time. And I found a local company here that seems to be trustworthy. I like the people I speak with there. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, you don't know. And it's because I haven't taken the time to learn about cars, right? Like that's something beyond my scope of knowledge. And they could tell me anything when I walk in there. And unfortunately, I would have to either believe it or take it somewhere else, right?
You've never been there and it's cost less than $200, right? Every single time. It's just a magic number. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah. Whatever you say. They just make up parts. But no, these guys seem to be very reliable. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, unless you're going to educate yourself or find someone that you know or trust, it is difficult. But we're not trying to disparage an entire industry here, but it's an interesting conversation nonetheless.
I need to educate myself. I'm going to work on that.
Yeah. That's what everything's about, right? It's like, if you have some bare bones knowledge, it's difficult to get suckered. That far extends beyond this, but unfortunately, there are lots of things to learn about, and at some point, you do have to outsource something. That's something that I've deemed is something worth outsourcing, but hey, you never know. If I'm inquisitive enough, maybe it'll be something I learn about.
Yep, fair enough. Okay, another one here. Kelly is actually hosting a meetup out of Milwaukee, and I believe Wealthy Accountant's going to be there, but Jim actually gave us a copy of his audiobook, The Simple Path to Wealth, and we were able to share that with Kelly, and she's going to be able to offer that in some capacity at that meetup. And it's amazing to me how much enthusiasm I'm seeing for meetups on our Facebook group. I mean, they are popping up all over the country. It's almost this groundswell of people that have suddenly realized this idea of community has so much power. And it's so valuable to be able to find like minds that are pursuing a common goal. And that common goal isn't the 2018 Range Rover Supersport, right? I mean, there is power in the people that you're trying to model yourself after are people that are pursuing a 30, 40, 50, and 75% savings rate. And it's really cool to see this groundswell of support for the idea of meetups for people that have never considered this possibility before. And going into next week, the very next episode that we're going to have, going to be, obviously this upcoming Monday, it's going to be a second episode with JL Collins. It's going to be part 2. It's going to be broken up into 2 parts. The first part is us discussing the idea of community, discussing the Chautauquas, a little bit of the Camp Mustache and some of the other camps that we're seeing popping up, just exploring this idea of connecting with other people that are of like mind. And then the second half of that is going to be an Ask Me Anything with JL Collins, and these questions are being sourced from our Facebook group. Again, coming from our Facebook group, this is the lifeblood of the show. So we're really looking forward to sharing that with you guys. And that's coming up in 3 days, this upcoming Monday. So definitely look forward to that. The way that we finish our Friday roundups is we actually read some feedback that we received on iTunes each week from people in our community. And we actually do a drawing for this. So we do a drawing for a copy of a book that we found valuable. And currently we're doing JL Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. And we also have a couple copies of Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And to enter this drawing, just leave us a short written review on iTunes. To do that, you can go to choosefi.com/iTunes. Just follow the directions there to leave us a review. And then we just ask that once you've done that, if you want to be a part of this drawing, that you just send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left us a review, and let us know what screen name you left it under so that we can match you up. And then we do 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winners on our Friday roundup. And Brad, how many winners do we have today?
Today we have 2 winners. And the first one is Nicholas. And Nicholas called this life-changing. I can't consume it all quickly enough. I've awoken. ChooseFi is tremendous in helping me piece together what FI will look like for me. Brad and Jonathan pull from fantastic resources and true life stories, painting the picture of a package I can create for myself and one that I can't possibly walk away from. I'm beyond excited or obsessed to realize entirely new goals for myself and my future. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're glad you're here. It's thrilling to be a part of this, not just to be able to put this message out there on a twice a week basis, but also just to learn right along with you guys. We can't walk away from this either. And so we're actually designing our lives in many cases around this show. That's how passionate we are about getting this out there.
All right. And Jonathan, our second winner is Danielle.
All right, and Danielle says, all fired up. I stumbled onto Choosify a few months ago after delving deeper into the personal finance and financial independence realms. I've listened to every episode more than once since then. I'm still working on paying off student loans, but this podcast not only provides entertainment, but it also provides actionable items that I can implement even while paying off debt. It has also energized me to figure out how to readjust my budget, solidified the concept of travel hacking, and pushed me to roll all of my Roth IRA 403b funds into the institutional version of VTSAX. My only request is to hear from people who are working towards or have achieved FI, who aren't married or were earning less than six figures. This is a phenomenal podcast and is the only one I specifically make time to listen to when new episodes air. Highly recommend. Thank you, Danielle. And we will try to act on those suggestions. It's certainly one of our spoken goals has been to explore this amazing journey from all the different ways that people tackle it. And there are an infinite number of ways to tackle this ultimate goal of financial independence. And we want to get a chance to do it really from every scenario, whether or not you're finding this journey for the first time in your 50s, or whether or not you're 16 years old and you're a second gen FI and you want to see how early you can push this thing and get this thing rolling. We want to find and explore ways to make this work for you and then present those on the show. This is by the FIRE community for the FIRE community. And let me just finish by saying, for a very, very short period of time, JL Collins actually reached out to us and he just released his audiobook, The Simple Path to Wealth. And so it's the audiobook version of The Simple Path to Wealth. He has given me just a few downloads available for that. So if for the next couple of weeks, if that is something that if you heard your name today and you would be interested in getting a audiobook version of The Simple Path to Wealth as opposed to the written book, just let us know in your email and we can hook you up for a very short period of time. So thanks to JL for making that possible for us. The fire is spreading, my friends, and we'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.